and taking the time to meet with us. I'm Janine. My pronouns are she, hers. I'm a program manager with SPI, and I'm a proud SPI State alum. And I'm calling in today on Tongva land, otherwise known as Los Angeles. And I'm joined today by Elizabeth. You want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. Elizabeth, pronouns she, her, or that is Elizabeth Ayala, and I am calling in from Riverside in SoCal.
And we have Cora here with us, helping us with the text. So
Hey,
thank you, Cora. For some logistics, we will reserve questions for the Q&A at the end of this webinar, so feel free to pose any questions in the Q&A box, which you can access by clicking the More button at the bottom of your screen. Questions in the chat will probably get lost, so please direct everything that you have in the Q&A so we can get back to it. And know that this webinar is being recorded and the slides will be made available to you, so no need to write everything down. You'll have access to the full recording and the slides. Next slide, please. To get us in today, we have an hour for this webinar, and we'll begin by sharing information on Women's Foundation California. We'll introduce you to the Dr. Beatriz Maria Solís Policy Institute, SPI for short, and formerly known as WPI. And we'll share information about the structure of the program. We'll go over the application process, and last but not least, we'll have the Q&A portion. And again, we'll be asking you to submit any questions that you have. And if you have a question, I'm sure others in the audience too, so we encourage all questions. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about Women's Foundation California. The Women's Foundation California is a statewide publicly supported foundation that advances gender justice, gender, racial, and economic justice by centering the experience and expertise of the communities most impacted by systemic injustice. Two of our core activities are grant making and different policy fellowships. We are defined by a feminist, intersectional, multi-issue movement building approach. The foundation launched the Solís Policy Institute, then known as the Women's Policy Institute, in 2003. We identified the need for community-based organizations and leaders to influence policy in order to ensure that progressive change was happening in California. The Solís Policy Institute, the flagship program of the Women's Foundation California, will be starting the 24th year with the 2027 class and is widely recognized as one of the most successful policy advocacy training programs in the U.S. Next slide, please.
And I'll do a couple slides right here, Elizabeth again. So a little bit about the SPI history. So SPI State is a year-long program that trains 20 grassroots leaders in state-level policy advocacy. And since it was launched in 2003, SPI has had a lot of success, including more than 600 inspiring and community-based leaders gaining training and now a part of the SPI alum network. And all of the policy projects spearheaded during SPI, 50 plus bills have been signed into law, 20 plus bills have been passed by the legislator, but perhaps were just vetoed on the governor's desk. And in 2021, the foundation renamed Women's Policy Institute to the Dr. Beatriz Maria Solís Policy Institute in honor of the late B. Solís and in partnership with the California Endowment. Next slide, please. Thank you. SPI's theory of change rests on the belief that bringing individuals who experience gender, racial, and economic injustice into the policy process will change both the culture and shape of our policy. So as an organization based on gender justice, we recognize that gender-based discrimination and violence disproportionately impacts transgender people, and our goals are to increase the number of non-binary and genderqueer people, cisgender and transgender women, and transgender men involved in the policy arena, and to increase the number of policies that reflect the needs and realities of Black, Indigenous, and communities of color, immigrant communities, low-income communities, and rural communities. So please review our website for more information on our transgender, gender variant, and intersex values as well. And then we also aim to strengthen the leadership, advocacy, and public policy knowledge of our participants. So our focus on participants includes strengthening their connections across the networks, meaning between the fellows in the same cohort, across organizations represented in the cohort, and across movements. Next slide, please. So SBI exists because our communities have been excluded from the policy process by design and because structural inequities are embedded in government. So our goal is to train participants on how to create progressive policy changes within the current legislative system as it stands today. So at the same time, we recognize that ultimately the policy process itself has to change. So we highlight this because the current policy process is not always a welcoming place. It is based on white, heterosexual, mostly cisgender male norms and can discount community voices. We strive to select trainers and speakers who reflect the diversity of our alumni network and California, but there will be times, sometimes days, when you won't see your community's diversity reflected in the folks at the front of the room. So we are also committed to changing with that within and throughout SPI. And hopefully the more of us with policy advocacy skills, the more of us who can train others. So ultimately, we see SPI as bridging the gap between the system as it is and the system as we want it to be. So we always welcome fellows in honest conversation about the unique place this puts the Institute in, and also the limitations that it brings. But just want to be reflective there. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Now to get into some more of the nitty-gritty about what to know about the SPI and the fellowship experience. So there are really 6 main things that are really critical to know about SPI and to take into consideration when you work on your application. First, SPI is team-based. We place accepted applicants into teams of 5 people by issue area. So it's important that you come into SPI with an ability to work well with others, compromise, and work out differences quickly. The policy process is based on a very strict legislative timeline that will push you and your team to move your bill forward. Second, the SPI revolves around an experiential learning and a learning while doing approach. This is a training program, but the bill that you choose is real. Once your team has chosen a bill, you and your teammates will do everything related to it. You'll find the author, work with the author's staff, conduct the research on your bill idea, and do all the lobbying. The bill belongs to your team and you own it. We know that the fellows who felt they've learned the most were able to get their bill to the governor's desk and their bill was movable. We want bills to move as far along the legislative process as possible for your learning. And remember that your team may choose a policy idea that is not a priority for you or your organization or your agency. This program requires you to still work on your team's bill, so make sure that your organization knows that they must give you paid staff time to participate fully in SPI regardless of the bill that you work on. On that same note, SPI takes a lot of time. Your team will have weekly 1-hour set meetings all year long with your mentor, and you are expected to be present at all of these meetings. As your bill makes it through the process, you can expect to have regular standing meetings with your author's office, any potential co-sponsors, committee consultants, etc. You will also need to set aside time to work on tasks outside of meetings, such as crafting letters of support, fact sheets, etc. Therefore, it is important to have support from your supervisor and organization about the time commitment of SPI so you can be fully present without feeling underwater. Fourth, SPI fosters individual learning development. One of our priorities is to help our fellows grow their leadership skills, eliminate self-limiting thoughts and behaviors, and step out of their comfort zone and increase personal agency. Our alums overwhelmingly feel that they grow more confident as a result of their participation in SPI. Fifth, the SPI operates within an intersectional framework, meaning our cohorts engage in conversations about anti-oppressive policymaking, power, gender identities, and more. Our fellows are expected to participate in these conversations as we believe this is a policy that empowers our communities. We're committed to responding to and prioritizing Black, Indigenous, people of color, and trans leadership, so the 2027 year will especially focus on ensuring that we create policy that integrates an anti-racism and transgender justice lens. Lastly, the SPI emphasizes cross-movement building. One of the beauties of SPI is that it brings together members of various social movements, many of which have been siloed for decades. Fellows take part in a fair amount of inter-team work, which allows for each team to incorporate ideas grounded in other social justice perspectives. You should expect to learn, grow, and be pushed by your fellow SPIers. Cross-movement building is an integral part of the Women's Foundation strategy for building broader and more interconnected social justice networks in California. What do we mean by hybrid? Applicants should know they'll spend time in trainings hosted by the foundation, as well as time to conduct meetings with legislators. Nowadays, elected officials in their offices as well, and the departments and the state governments are typically conducting their business in person. This means that all fellows will be required to be in Sacramento outside of retreats at one point or another to pitch bill ideas or lobby for your bill. In the Solís Policy Institute, the fellowship is a mix of both in-person and virtual events. Applicants should know that all retreats and seminars are mandatory, and there's no capacity to host Zoom participation during in-person events. Next slide, please. Please save these dates on your calendar. These are, again, they're up on the website and the slides will go out. But some things to note is that the SPI includes 4 training retreats that are 4 to 5 days long. The first and fourth retreat are in person in Sacramento. Retreat 2 and 3 are online. These retreats include lectures and time to work on your bill and are essential to fellows learning. These retreats also give you space to meet some of the most important players in the legislative process: advocates, staffers, legislators, government employees, and lobbyists. And we know that these retreats are exhausting. Don't plan to do any other work during these retreats, and tell your supervisor that you will not be able to work during these retreats, even if they are virtual. And we really ask you to have these conversations early with your supervisor and ensure you're on the same page so that you can make this commitment. The seminar retreats are virtual, as you can see, and they are not full day retreats. But again, we want to make sure that they're blocked off. So please make sure that you're able to participate these days before you apply, and hold them on your calendar until you're accepted in the program. And we will be asking you about your attendance as part of the interview process. These dates are up on the webpage, and just a disclaimer, we may add a seminar or 2 depending on the needs of the class, and we'll provide you with as much notice as possible, and we will record them. So what does the year look like? In Retreat 1, you will get to know your team and mentor, receive foundational training and how SPI bills are made, as well as our values, intersectional approaches to policy advocacy, and you really begin to be brainstorming your policy ideas for what you want your bill to be so you can get ready to start pitching your bill. Retreat 2 in December, which is again virtual, is when you'll have finalized your policy idea, your bill idea. You'll start looking for a potential author, and you'll continue with training sessions that reflect our intersectional framework. Teams will begin pitching ideas in December. What this means is it looks like a single day of travel to Sacramento to secure the bill authors, and teams who are best prepared also held several virtual meetings ahead of time, and this finalized the commitment from the author's office. In March, we'll have Retreat 3, where you'll be getting ready for your committee hearings, and you'll be learning how to prepare for testimony. We'll also have a public speaker trainer who works with you on your testimony, and you'll be working on your communications and advocacy strategies. In May, Retreat 4 is held in Sacramento. We prepare pitches for the legislative reception, networking tips, opportunities for in-person meetings at the Capitol, and how to prepare for the second house. Between each of these retreats, you will again have weekly team calls, be required to read materials, use supplemental lessons, and participate in 8 seminars, in addition to conducting significant team and individual work time to advance your bill. And these meetings have to happen within the 9 to 5 p.m. of the workday, because that's when offices will meet with you, as well as any coalition partners that you meet and other experts that you meet in the issue area. I'll pass it to Elizabeth to talk more about who's eligible to apply.
So SPI accepts non-binary and genderqueer people, cisgender and transgender women, and transgender men. And so while we work hard to make sure that correct pronouns are used by fellows, trainers, and policymakers, we often can't control when someone misgenders someone else. What we do, so we recognize that no place is 100% safe, but we do strive for a brave space that is welcoming and affirming to all. And we have procedures in place, such as, a quick and simple correction to our guests. and for when harm occurs, such as using the wrong pronouns. And so we also accept individuals living or working in any part of California and working in a community-based or nonprofit setting with the full support of their employer and or supervisor. If you are not currently employed by a community-based or nonprofit organization, please email the SPI program after the seminar to seek advice about your eligibility. There's also an FAQ on the website about this if you can read through it before emailing us. And if you're planning on going to school or know you will change jobs during the fellowship year, this might not be a good year to apply, something to consider just because of the intensity of the nature of the work. And so as a part of your application, you will be asked to agree to a full list of participation requirements, and your supervisor will also be asked to sign on recognizing these requirements. Please do yourself the program, yourself, and your organization a favor, and don't underplay the requirements. In terms of cost of the fellowship, thanks to the generous support of many funders, the fellowship is free and it's fully subsidized by Women's Foundation California. That being said, you do not receive a participation stipend. What it means is that the foundation is covering travel, lodging, and meals for your time in Sacramento. The program funds a mentor as well for each team. And then additionally, each team is given funds to cover travel to committee hearings and other related items. So just an important note, retreats are all programmed, but because of the nature of the build process, every fellow will travel at one point or another for hearings, lobbying, etc. And so we fund that travel, and you use it with either with team funds for that intermittent travel. And lastly, if you have children or have to do attendant care, we do provide reimbursements to help cover the cost of either attendant or childcare during the time that you will need to be at retreats. If this is a need for you, please let us know, as it does have some tax implications, but we do what we can to support folks doing attendant care. And I'll pass it back to Janine.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And again, feel free to start putting your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to those questions in the Q&A section. A little bit more about the application process. The online application form, which is linked on our website, goes through SurveyMonkey Apply, and it will direct you through a set of individual and organizational questions. You will also be prompted to upload a one-page resume and the applicant requirements agreement. You can download this form from the application, and you and your supervisor must initial and sign the agreements. And if you don't have access to a printer, please make sure to email us. One of the application tasks is an individual narrative, which entails answering a series of questions that you can find in the application form on SurveyMonkey Apply. Please refer to the application or instructions on SurveyMonkey Apply for more specifics. And then there are two specific questions on the individual narrative. One is we're asking you to include a paragraph from your supervisor describing why your participation in SPI will benefit your organization and your employer. And please include the name, title, and email of the individual making the statement. And this would be a written statement. And then we also ask you to describe how you will manage participating in a process and system that's not always safe for individuals who've experienced trauma and/or oppression. Next slide, please. This year, we have 4 issue areas, and we aim to feature teams working to address racism, anti-Blackness, cis-heteropatriarchy through the following specific areas: criminal justice reform, immigrant economic security, reproductive health rights and justice, survivor justice and safety. You'll find the complete description of each of these issue areas on our SPI State application webpage. Notice under each area there are sub-issues. The 2 points to remember are that 1, the foundation works to select teams with common interests within these big umbrellas, so the team has common ground to pick a bill idea. And 2, a reminder that these areas are very broad, so your team may develop a viable bill idea that isn't exactly aligned with your work at your organization, and that needs to be okay for your team to have a viable learning experience in the tight legislative timeline. Next slide, please. What makes a strong candidate? There will be a selection committee that convenes in August to decide on finalists. and fellows will be selected through a competitive application process. We will select approximately 20 fellows in total, and applicants will be contacted by email by August 5th to inform them of the committee's decision. Successful individual applicants will possess deep content knowledge, which can be lived, learned, or from work, an ability to get along with others. 3, how participating in the SPI will increase the policy advocacy work at your organization or in your community. 4, a commitment to learning and participation. And 5, full support of your employer during and between retreats. You might be wondering how we build teams. The teams of 5 will have a diversity of experience and geographic representation, diversity of backgrounds and age, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, etc., and similar policy interests within each issue area. We'd like to conclude by reminding you that we take many factors into consideration when selecting the fellows for each cohort. And if you're not admitted this year, please try again next year, and we strongly encourage second and third applications. So now we'll be transitioning to the question and answer portion of this seminar. Please use the Q&A box, which is in the More chat if you go to the bottom of your screen. Questions in the chat might be missed, and any questions that we don't get to, we'll send a follow-up email with answers for the... Yeah, go ahead, Elizabeth.
Oh, Janine, can you type the email into the
Yes.
chat that people can send in case they have employment eligibility questions?
Yeah.
But one question that's come in is, who are the mentors? And so one is every team has their own mentor. And these are all people who have extensive experience in lobbying. And I would say our goal is 2 or 3, depending on the year, are generally also alumni from the Solís Policy Institute. And so all of the mentors, some of them have been executive directors, some of them have been lobbyists for 25 plus years. They all have experience inside the Capitol, as well as working with community, such as the ones represented in Solís Policy Institute. There are no other questions at this time. Let me know if there's, go ahead, use the chat box, question and answer box. But I'm trying to think if there's any questions that usually come up. I know one question that generally comes up is how do you pick a bill? At the first retreat, the fellows come together and your mentor facilitates like info panels, and then you brainstorm. So bill ideas are all from the team itself. And then another question in the chat I see as, how were these policy focus areas chosen for this upcoming cohort? So the policy areas, well, they were the policy areas this year that we're still doing, the fellows are still doing. They're all important issues to us. Sometimes they change depending on what we see in what our alumni are informing us. But again, the issue areas are criminal justice reform, reproductive health, rights and justice, survivor safety and justice. This year it's known as trauma services and prevention, but we changed the name, and also immigrant economic security. And then another question is, if a bill doesn't make it through the typical ideal timeline, does policy advocacy work ever continue beyond the fellowship or get picked up by the next cohort? So that is one. That is one thing that does happen, is either your bill doesn't make it through the whole process, and then the team has to pivot. Either they get split up amongst other teams to continue the experiential learning, or the team as a whole stays together and adopts a new bill. And then in some instances, the bill becomes what's known as a 2-year bill, where the team has to have a conversation around who can continue on in the next legislative year. Typically, the team who initiated the bill, some folks continue on with the bill idea later. Janine, one question is, what is the average amount of applicants that we typically receive? I don't recall if you do.
We usually receive about 55 to 60 applicants every year. So that means that we accept about half of the cohort. We accept half of the applicants make it into about half the cohort. But again, that fluctuates because some issue areas get more applicants than others, and that's why we still want to encourage everyone to apply because we do offer a wait list, and we also want you to be able to apply a second or third time.
So another question in the Q&A box is, are there opportunities for continued involvement or alumni collaboration after completing the fellowship? And I really think it depends on the alum and the work they continue to do. Some of the alumni we've had, a few of the alumni we've had, not the majority, say, you know what, this isn't actually for me, but I want to raise money for these kinds of causes. So it depends on what the alumni are doing. Sometimes alums are invited back to speak to the Institute about their experience the previous year, for example. Sometimes alumni, we send information out to the alumni network about opportunities that were presented to Women's Foundation California that we might be able to offer in turn to the alumni. And so additionally, alumni are always invited to our public events, such as a key event for the Solís Policy Institute State program is the legislative reception. So a next question is, does WPI have existing relationships with particular legislators before starting the bill advocacy? So yes, I mean, when you are looking at who to pitch your particular bill ideas, the two big factors that we consider are, who are the legislators championing the issue, but also who are the legislators who have previously authored SPI bills. Those are some of the people that we encourage our fellows to return to, especially depending on a previous team's experience. And the foundation does have relationships with legislators ourselves that we try to cultivate and or learn from.
Elizabeth, there's a question in the chat around any more info for folks not formally employed by a relevant org or nonprofit, but deeply embedded as a volunteer.
What I would generally say is, so please email us what your situation is, because we have found that people who use vacation for doing the program don't have a good learning experience. It's just too much because, like Janine mentioned previously, the amount of times you have to meet, but also sometimes the nature of how quickly the legislative process demands that we answer about particular amendments, for example. So that's why we just want to be realistic. That's also one of the reasons the Institute exists, because it's such a complicated and demanding process. We're trying to support getting folks into the process, yet we understand gaps exist. And that's one part of the capacity to do the fellowship. But the other reason is that we do really want to put people who have direct experience, whether it's personal or working with community, in the issue areas that we're looking at. And so that's also a reason we generally have fellows representing different orgs or nonprofits, because we feel a principal value is those closest to the problem are in the best position to solve it and to create policies. And then another question that came in is, do folks need experience in the focus issue areas to apply, or is having any policy experience beneficial? I would say both. You can do this program with very little policy experience, but also you could have policy experience. You could be a person who's a direct service provider who wants to use your experience to create a policy advocacy unit at your organization, for example. And that personal experience can be whether you've been serving in particular immigrant serving organizations for the Immigrant Economic Security team, or you yourself have that personal experience. And so we think both lived and professional experience are important for the program. And then another question is, what do the virtual seminars typically look like? The virtual seminars are usually trainings. There's some time with your mentor or with teams, but usually they're trainings offered such as what lobbying rules are, and they are also generally recorded. And as you can see on the website, there's seminars, which are just a portion of the day, and then we have 2 virtual retreats, which are all day. And so we do plan for breaks. We plan for generous lunch to allow people to stay plugged in when we are online. Another question is, do alumni usually keep up with each other afterwards? How's the culture within the teams during the fellowship or afterwards? So during the fellowship, at the first retreat, we do have teams create what we call a management report, where we try to foster every team creating their own expectations of how you will work. Mentors are also checking in on how team dynamics are going. And it really, I think, depends on what the team makes of it. We don't expect, every single team to be besties, but generally all of our teams have had very cordial relationships. And it also has required direct conversations sometimes, because when we're looking at how a bill may change, some of these issues are deeply close and personal to our heart. So we do try to establish from the get-go norms so that fellows can have respectful conversations, because both this process is stressful, but also this process is about a bill that we all deeply care about. And then for alumni afterwards, it really depends on your initiative. And so we do have times where fellows can see each other at foundation events, but generally it depends on just what effort you put in during the fellowship year, how folks stay in touch past the fellowship year. There are no more questions in the question and answer. Do you see me in the chat, Janine?
No, we answered all of them. If anyone has any remaining questions that we didn't get to, please feel free to email us.
In the meantime, just at I think the final slide is, so the entire application, including the required attachments signed by your supervisor and yourself, must complete it and submit it online. We have a particular portal that the website takes you to by 10 p.m. on Wednesday, May 27th. And so once you complete and submit the application, you will receive an email confirmation of receipt that's auto-generated by the platform, or that is the portal. So please know that interviews will be held June 22nd through July 12th. However, not every applicant will be interviewed, and that does not receiving an interview. Sometimes we do accept applicants just based upon the strength of their written materials, and that decisions will be released no later than August 5th. So again, we encourage your application, even if you don't have policy experience, and if you're considering entering the policy field. If you have any questions about Solís Policy Institute, please start with our FAQ on the website, and then you can contact us by email. I will put the email again in the web chat, and that's it. Thank you so much, everyone, for your attendance. Oh, there's one question that came in. What are some challenges you have faced in past cohorts? I guess it depends on, I think that I will say, and maybe Janine, you can weigh in, the two biggest challenges I feel that each cohort and each team face is, one is, and that we will push fellows on this, is picking a bill idea. What kind of bill idea can be complicated. Our goal is for you to get to the governor's desk. So you can't pick a bill idea that's so thorny and ambitious that you won't learn the process, because you'll likely get booted out of the legislative process too early, right? So that's, I think, a major challenge, is picking a bill that's meaningful, et cetera. But the other, I think, is just keeping up with the demanding nature of the legislative process. Sometimes there's lulls, and sometimes there are amendments that your team faces because it's about to go to a committee hearing and you have to answer in 24 hours. So I would say the time commitment that you invest, the earlier you put in some good work, the better it'll be following steps, but overall the time commitment. There's one more question. I have one last. What is the average age range of applicants, and what should we expect interviews to look like? So the ages, we hope we aim to have a diversity in ages, from folks who are, a couple years out of formal schooling, to folks who have life schooling and are closer in their 50s, 60s. So our classes have had that range of a cohort, although generally people are in their intermediate era of their career, and that interviews will be conducted by either staff at the foundation or sometimes the mentors themselves trying to assemble their own team. And that the interviews, the best thing you can do is to just remind yourself of what you submitted on your application, and they're conversational, and either staff or the mentors are looking at both putting a team together that has common interests that they can pick a bill idea from, and or poised to take advantage of the fellowship. Again, feel free to email us. Thank you so much, everyone.